Okay, so today I want to talk about the tampering actions in JavaScript execution analysis after we did the BCFGs. So during this path of finding tampering vulnerabilities and then doing the tampering actions on those vulnerabilities, we wanted to first create business control flow graphs. And that helped us map out the business logic of the web application. And so when we did that, we could find where the paywall was being generated and by what condition it was being generated. And then through that, we were able to find those locations of whatever was nearest or most optimal to bypassing the paywall. That is where we focused on. So that is what we know up to now. We've created our BCFGs, and now we're looking at attacking these locations. And so Kim and his team found 4 different ways of tampering with these locations. And so kind of overall, like why do all of this? Well, it's because there's the dynamic nature of JavaScript. It is really hard to do this analysis and execution statically. So because of the nature of JavaScript being dynamic, we need to have these sort of procedures and tools to help us as researchers sort of understand more about the web application in a deeper way to find these vulnerable locations. So this is kind of like the who, what, where, why, how of identifying JavaScript code elements to tamper with. So we went through the BCFGs and we found locations. Now we need to find code elements in those locations. And so, who does this? With Kim's team, they created the dynamic analysis tool. And what does this? The JavaScript functions and branches that may be responsible. Now we're talking about business flow tampering. So on the client side, so we're looking at DOM mutation and business logic decisions. Where? So this was done with the call stacks that they collected during the DOM mutation events that they observed. So they went through like an initial flow, and they found DOM mutation events that when they were interacting with the website. And so now they're going to use those call stacks to help them. And the why and the how. So why? Because DOM changes, they signal that business logic events have happened. And in terms of our research, specifically on paywall bypasses, this is incredibly important. And so also functions on the stack are likely to be relevant to the logic that we want to tamper with. So again, we're going back to this business flow tampering, and these are indicated by the DOM. And DOM manipulations are a good indicator of that business flow tampering has occurred, especially dealing with paywalls and ads and login prompts and subscription details and that sort of thing. And so how do we do this? We automatically browse the website. Okay, usually this is going to be either manually, but most of the time it'll be using like an automated tool like Puppeteer. Hook into the JavaScript engine to capture those function call stacks on DOM mutations, so just gathering more data on the DOM mutations, and then aggregate these into call trees, and then we rank them on vulnerability scanning. Now, Kim's team did this through a couple machine learning models, and we're very successful with that. So let's talk about the overview of tampering actions. So Kim's team found 4 main types: disable callee, disable caller, force branching, and repeat callee. And we will go into detail of all of these. But it's after finding the BCFGs and finding these locations, this is like the next level that you go. And there's 4 different pathways, and it's kind of dependent on what the situation is and what the flow is, and we'll see that. So high level. So trace through the BCFG, find the key access control point, and then tamper that most influential node just before or above it, like we saw in our previous video. And if you haven't seen that, I would say go and look at that video about the BCFGs, because that visual of the BCFG gives a pretty accurate and in-depth view of how the business application, the web application works. And so then you're just more easily able to find that location. Essentially what it is it's taking how a functionality of a web app has a paywall or some sort of a subscription model, some sort of business revenue generating aspect to it, and it models it in a visual way to help a team find vulnerable locations for tampering. So the first one that we'll go over is disable callee. So this is just straight up just skipping an execution of a function call. Maybe you're calling a paywall being shown, or you're calling for a paywall to be shown. Any sort of call for some sort of business process that's generating revenue for the application will just be disabled on the client side. And then we have disable caller. So we're just replacing that function body with an empty implementation. So we'll still have that function be essentially called, but it'll just be empty. So we're just going to disable the functionality that function had. And so this is an example scenario, so like a video platform with mid-content ads. And so instead of tracking every ad-related function call, just disable that show ad function entirely. So just make it empty. And so it still is, it's kind of a lower footprint. And then we have forced branching. So we're always going to direct control flow to a specific branch, and this is really where the BCFGs really take hold. Is it makes it much easier to find what branch to force. And why is it useful? Well, it essentially overcomes the control flows where they rely on external and internal state. So, triggering full access on metered sites or subscription services, so this is just, and this is probably one of the more straightforward ones, especially knowing what we did in the BCFGs in the previous video. And then we have a repeat callee. Now this one isn't necessarily about bypassing a paywall. This is more about getting a reward. Maybe there's a web application that offers a certain amount of points, or maybe it's even monetary, and this is related to a function being called, and so you just kind of keep calling that function, and you're trying to repeat it as much as possible without it being flagged as a sort of malicious behavior. And so the implementation strategy, first the goal is to exploit the business logic loophole. So without having that sort of footprint that says, oh, this is malicious. So there's a little bit of a strategy to it, but you're just trying to increase your points or increase sort of overall benefit from repeating a callee. And so now we'll go over some examples. So very simple example here. So we're just having a show article function, and it loads the article, but then it shows the paywall, and then after doing the functionality of the show paywall, then it'll show the article. Now, To get past that, we can just skip the call to show paywall. So just disable the callee here, and then we just have load article and show article. So this is a very simple example of what disable callee is and what Kim and his team is using as one of their attack paths. Now we have disable caller. So we have this enforce add display policy, and it's called by enforce add. It's called down here, and then it has one if block, and it's just checking if an ad block is detected, and so and then it calls the functionality of the advertisement. And so here we have the disable the caller. So we're just going to have an empty function here. So all actions are bundled inside the one function. So we don't want to just skip the show ad block. We want to stop everything. So we have to disable calling the whole function. So we just make it, we go into DevTools and we just make it empty. The force branching, this is where we go back to our BCFGs here. We have a function, just like from the previous video, and we will have and you can stop the video to look more at that code, but the main point that I wanted to go over is this BCFG and where is the most beneficial place for somebody who wants to tamper with the business flow. Where can you get full access? Well, you can grant full access here and at this node, and this is contingent on a user being an admin. You can grant full access. It's the highest level. It's the highest up in the tree, and it's also granting full access. So that is probably where we want to go, is tamper with the is user admin. And so we force the true branch on the is user and admin. And then finally we have repeat callee, so it gives user points, and then so we just keep repeating that. Actually, I have a typo here. I have 5 here and 10 in the other one. But so we just want to keep repeating that over and over and over again. So we want to do something like a set timeout and have this, give user points, but with a delay, so it's not flagged. So, and this, just to wrap it up, this is the summary of the 4 different ways that Kim and his team, in their article called Finding Client-Side Business Flow Tampering Vulnerabilities. These are the 4 different actions that they find, tampering actions. And here I've summarized the purpose for each one. And so each of them support different tampering goals, and they do it in slightly different ways. And it's kind of based on the BCFGs that you previously made. And so applications in web security is usually paywall circumvention or getting more rewards or incentive exploitation. So this is very helpful in my research and going into paywall attack vectors and trying to find better ways to defend them. So, and thank you very much.